100 years ago today, November the 11th, 1918, in a carriage of a private train, the armistice was signed that ended what has come to be known as the First World War. Estimates of the carnage range from 15 to 19 million deaths and some 23 million military wounded at the end of the conflict, making it one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. The uneasy peace that was brought about after the Great War has had and continues to have echoes even down to our own day, and in some way has to do with almost every conflict in the world that has happened ever since. When the smoke cleared and the soldiers returned to their homes, it became quickly clear that the world as everyone knew it before the assassination of Franz Ferdinand on June the 28th, 1914, had changed, and in many respects would never be the same. For Catholics, it marked the virtual end of monarchical government in Europe as the end of the heirs of the Holy Roman Empire. The continuation of the ancient and medieval world dawned. Now, as the conflict tore apart the known world, there were only two major players who had the foresight to envision an international order that could be restored in a way for peace to prevail. Pope Benedict XV was elected to the chair of Peter in 1914, shortly after the war began. And Emperor Karl of Austria, who was crowned king in 1916 of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Holy Father used every spiritual and diplomatic means at his disposal to call for an end to the most disastrous conflict then known to history. He condemned nationalism, racism, and class conflict as characteristics of the age, and saw the origins of war in the contempt for authority, injustice in the relations between classes, the attainment of material goods made into the sole object of human activity, and the unrestrained striving after independence. On August the 1st, 1917, the Pope presented a 7-point peace plan. Number 1, the moral force of right be substituted for the material force of arms. Number 2, there must be simultaneous and reciprocal diminution of armaments. Number 3, a mechanism for international arbitration must be established. Number 4, true liberty and common rights over the sea should exist. Number 5, there should be a renunciation of war indemnities. 6, occupied territories should be evacuated. And finally, number 7, there should be an examination of rival claims. Well, you won't be surprised that nobody listened to it. Woodrow Wilson, a Freemason and a notorious anti-Catholic, said that peace was impossible, although he later admitted that the Bishop of Rome was right and integrated some of those ideas into his own peace plan. The Italians engineered the Pope right out of the peace talks because they didn't want to face international scrutiny for how Italian unification happened at the invasion and hostile takeover of the Papal States. And only one political leader had the wisdom to not only listen to but encourage others to adopt the papal peace plan. Emperor Karl of Austria was that man. But he was exiled to Madeira, where he died at the young age of 34 in 1922. In 2002, St. John Paul II beatified him, raising him to the altars as an example of heroic virtue. A soldier, diplomat, monarch, politician, and family man, who saw his beloved country disintegrate before his very eyes because of others' hatred and self-interest. A saint whose prophetic voice was ignored and reviled, whose family was abused and maltreated, but who time has vindicated as the truly wise ruler, who, had his leadership been followed, would have saved Western civilization from agony and very near collapse. But who was this Charles of Austria? Charles married his childhood sweetheart, Princess Zita of Bourbon-Parma in 1911, who was a match for his royal lineage, but even more importantly, his devout faith. In what has to be one of the most romantic storybook marriages of all time, his last words to her were this: "I will love you forever in heaven." And she wore the black of mourning for the next 67 years as a widow until she died. Both Charles and Zita knew that marriage was a sacrament and their chosen path to holiness. When they exchanged their vows at a nuptial mass, they had absolutely no idea that even though they were literally some of the most powerful people in the world, in only a matter of years, they and their 8 children would lose their home, their country, their position, their wealth, their everything. But they had each other, and they had their faith. And that was enough. It was their heroic virtue and faithfulness to the sacrament of marriage in times tougher than most of us can imagine, which makes them models for us even today. Charles was an admirable figure, steeped in contemplative prayer with a rich interior life, but he wasn't a monk. He was a king and a husband. And it was the light of that supernatural life of grace which guided his work in a time when men had grown blind, deaf, and dumb to the life of Christ in the soul. He was no weakling. He knew that divine providence had put him on the throne of an empire, and that to him had been entrusted millions of people to keep in peace together. He never abandoned his post, even when he was told that the empire was no more. He refused to abdicate, even as he relinquished his right to participate in the activities of the state. Courage in not running away from what he called those street thugs, right? And prudence in realizing that he had to accept a situation that he could not change. He knew that his vocation to holiness was to be lived in work and the family. As he said to Zita the night of their wedding, "It is my job to get you into heaven, and you me." So all of my Catholic single ladies out there, if your man is not ready to say that, you kick him to the curb because you don't need him, okay? He knew that the exercise of his political office had to be done according to the law of God above everything else. An English writer, Herbert Vivian, wrote, "Karl was a great leader, a prince of peace, who wanted to save the world from war, a statesman with ideas to save his people from the complicated problems of his empire, a king who loved his people, a fearless man, a noble soul, distinguished, a saint from whose grave blessings come." Even Anatole France, the French novelist, stated, "Emperor Karl was the only decent man to come out of the war in a leadership position." But no one listened to him. He sincerely wanted peace, and therefore was despised by the whole world. It was a wonderful chance that was lost. It's easy to see the life of Karl of Austria as a tragedy, as a lost cause, and to see Pope Benedict XV's plan for peace as too otherworldly to work. But as Catholics, we know that the saints have a knowledge which is often not appreciated by the children of men at the time, swayed as they are by passion and sin, but which so often is seen later to be true wisdom. The saints are there so that we are not doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Think about how our parish, our spiritual home, is under the patronage of our Lord, under the title of Prince of Peace, which means that our Lord is entrusting to us a special mission to pray and work for peace. Peace in our homes and families, in our workplaces and schools, in our nations and in our world. And that peace that the world cannot give comes from the supernatural life of grace, the very life of the Trinity in our souls. If we are to have peace, we must dedicate ourselves to the pursuit not of liberty and happiness, but holiness. As a history buff, I've always found all of the people and issues involved in World War I endlessly fascinating. But I also personally have been very moved by the stories of Benedict XV and Karl of Austria. The cultus of devotion to Karl of Austria was something that I encountered, first of all, years ago in rarefied European royalist circles, where Karl was a hero of resistance to modernism run amok. But it's been fascinating to watch over time as the story of Karl and Zita, whose beatification process is also underway, has come to be better known over the whole world. The last miracle that has been certified by the Holy See was when a Baptist woman from Kissimmee, Florida, was healed of terminal breast cancer after she prayed for Karl's intercession in 2008. Well, needless to say, she's certainly Catholic now, right? It's important for us to have strong models of Catholic manhood, fatherhood, military and political life, virtue and holiness, and family life in the domestic church. We need a saint, a patron in heaven who intercede for us in so many ways. And so this afternoon I want to share with you a little something. Sometimes my staff call me the idea machine, right, that is constantly going all the time. Oh, we could do this and we could do that, and there's all kinds of great things we could do. And sometimes I have to say, wait a minute, is this God's will or is this mine? But I have made an official request to Archduke Lorenz von Habsburg, with the permission of our bishop, to obtain a relic of Karl of Austria to construct a small shrine here at Prince of Peace, kind of like the one that we have to St. Josemaria Escriva over there. It would be the only such shrine in South Carolina. If our request is granted, we can then celebrate his feast day on October the 26th every year and have a tremendous opportunity for graces, healings, and miracles through his intercession. And it was very interesting. This week, out of the blue, I got an email from the postulator, the priest who is responsible for advancing his cause in Rome, who said, "Hey, I know I've never met you before, but I want to come down and spend some time at Prince of Peace." So he will be here for a couple of days the week before Thanksgiving. There are no coincidences, right? So please pray for the success of this particular endeavor. As we commemorate the Armistice of 1918, an historical event whose anniversary should be solemnly remembered for those who died and those who remain behind to rebuild Christian civilization, it is time for us to light a candle in darkness by making the beauty of holiness shine just a little bit brighter in our world.